So, I want you to imagine, just for a second, walking into a sprawling ancient metropolis.
Right, a really massive one.
Yeah, exactly. We are talking about a vast settlement with up to, 10,000 houses, sheltering tens of thousands of people.
Which is a scale that's hard to even picture for the ancient world.
It really is. I mean, the air is thick with the smoke of 1,000 hearths. The streets are buzzing with the daily labor of a massive population, and the sheer scale of the place rivals early cities anywhere on Earth.
Definitely.
But as you navigate these packed earthen streets, you start to notice what isn't there.
The missing pieces.
Right. There are no towering palaces. There are no monuments dedicated to a king. There are no obvious entrenched wealth gaps between the neighborhoods.
Which is mind-blowing.
And perhaps most baffling for a society of this size, there is absolutely no writing system to keep track of it all. So you have to ask, how is a city like that even possible?
Well, it completely challenges the core assumptions we usually make about human organization. I mean, the traditional narrative of civilization dictates that once a population reaches a certain critical mass, hierarchy is just, inevitable.
Because you need someone in charge.
Exactly. We assume scale inherently requires top-down authority to prevent the whole thing from collapsing.
Right. The moment you have 15,000 people living shoulder to shoulder, conventional wisdom says you need a boss.
Yep.
And today, we're doing a deep dive into a 2026 research article published in the journal PLOS One, authored by Mishka and colleagues. And this paper reveals exactly how these massive ancient societies survived and thrived without a central ruler.
It's a fascinating study.
It really is. We are looking at the recent excavation of an enormous, enigmatic building in Romania, something archaeologists categorize as a megastructure. Okay, let's unpack this. Where exactly are we on the timeline, and who are the people building these massive kingless cities?
So we are focusing on the Cucuteni-Trypillia culture.
Oh.
This civilization flourished roughly between 3990 and 3640 BC across this really massive territory. It encompasses parts of modern-day Ukraine, Moldova, and Romania.
So this is very old.
Extremely. I mean, long before the pyramids were constructed in Egypt and predating the massive urban centers of Mesopotamia, this culture was building what archaeologists call megasites.
Wow.
Yeah, these were incredibly dense, highly organized settlements that really pushed the boundaries of what we thought prehistoric European societies were capable of.
And to put that into perspective for you listening, managing a population of that size without a written ledger or a monarch is a logistical nightmare.
Oh, completely.
I mean, the human brain generally struggles to maintain stable social relationships beyond a few hundred people.
The Dunbar number, basically.
Exactly. So when you multiply that by 50 or 100, the paradox of equality becomes glaring. If you don't have a king, a mayor, a police force, or a standardized taxation system, how do you stop the chaos? It's like trying to run a massive modern music festival or a giant co-op housing association with no management.
Right. And to figure that out, you look for the architectural signatures of how they manage themselves.
What do you mean?
Well, in most ancient cities, power is highly visible. You find a grand temple compound in the center, or a heavily fortified citadel where the ruling class isolates itself.
Sure.
But in the Cucuteni-Trypillia megasites, those structures are just completely absent. The domestic houses are largely uniform, arranged in deliberate, concentric circles or highly organized grids.
It almost sounds like a decentralized network. We usually think of ancient cities like modern corporations, a CEO at the top shouting orders down the chain.
Right.
But this layout looks more like an ant colony or a complex software network where highly organized behaviors emerge from local peer-to-peer interactions rather than a single source of command.
That's a great way to look at it.
Still, I have to push back a little here.
Yeah.
Humans are not ants. We don't spontaneously fall into perfect concentric housing grids. Someone has to decide where the defensive ditches are dug or how the grain is distributed during a bad harvest.
And that is the exact logistical hurdle that has kept researchers debating for decades.
I bet.
If there isn't a ruling elite calling the shots, how do you manage the physical and social infrastructure of a city that size? Well, the primary theory explored in this paper suggests the answer lies in these anomalous megastructures.
Okay, the megastructures.
Yeah. If we connect this to the bigger picture, these megastructures might be the missing link to understanding prehistoric communal decision-making.
Interesting.
Rather than palaces for rulers, they may have been the vital physical spaces where a kingless society actively negotiated its survival.
Because if they didn't have a central authority laying out the city plan, you'd expect a messy sprawl, right?
Basically, just organic, chaotic growth.
But looking at the maps of Stăuceni Holm, and that's the specific settlement this paper focuses on, it's remarkably deliberate.
Oh, it's incredibly organized.
We are looking at a 4-hectare promontory in Botoșani County, Romania.
Yeah, and the geography to Stăuceni Holm itself tells us they were planning collectively. The settlement sits on a plateau bordered by a steep slope on one side and a river valley on the other, utilizing natural defenses.
Sure.
But they enhanced that landscape with a highly complex system of excavated ditches and wooden palisades surrounding the inner living areas.
Which is a huge undertaking.
Absolutely. Moving that much earth and timber requires massive, coordinated communal labor.
And the way researchers discovered the layout of this specific site is just honestly a brilliant application of physics.
It really is.
Between 2021 and 2024, they didn't just start digging blind, they mapped the subterranean layout using geomagnetic surveys.
Right, which is basically like an X-ray for the ground.
Exactly, because when ancient people built with clay, and later those structures burned down either accidentally or, deliberately, the immense heat caused the iron oxide particles within the clay to lose their magnetic orientation. Then, as the clay cooled, those particles realigned themselves with the Earth's magnetic field as it existed in that exact moment nearly 6,000 years ago.
They essentially locked in a prehistoric magnetic signature.
Which is wild.
It is. And because that ancient magnetic signature contrasts slightly with the unburned surrounding soil today, modern magnetometers can detect it without turning a single shovel of dirt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So when the team ran these surveys over Stăuceni Holm, the image that emerged was startlingly organized. They identified about 45 standard house plots.
And how big are those?
These domestic dwellings are generally between 70 and 120 square meters.
Which is a very functional size for a multi-generational family.
Exactly.
But nestled just behind the defensive ditch system, right near what appears to be the main entrance to the settlement, the geomagnetic survey picked up a massive anomaly.
A huge one.
A single building, roughly 350 square meters in size.
It completely dwarfs the surrounding architecture.
Yeah.
And to understand the significance of this, we have to look at the specific criteria the authors outline for classifying a megastructure.
Okay, what makes it a megastructure?
Size is obvious. It must be significantly larger than the domestic houses, but location is equally critical. These structures are invariably situated in a specific kind of space, usually a free area, a ring corridor, or a prominent plaza.
It has to stand out.
Right. Finally, it has to be highly visible.
It's designed to be a focal point. Like when you walked into Stăuceni Holm, this 350 square meter behemoth was one of the very first things you encountered.
Exactly.
And for you listening, it's important to grasp how rare this data is. We aren't just talking about another old foundation.
Not at all.
According to the research, this is one of only 6 of these megastructures to ever be excavated in detail across this entire ancient culture.
Yeah, the others include famous sites like Nebelivka and Maidanetsky in Ukraine.
So we are getting a front row seat to an incredibly rare architectural phenomenon.
Definitely. And to really understand how this space functioned, we need to look at the sheer physical effort required to construct it during the excavations of 2023 and 2024.
What did they find when they finally dug in?
Well, the first thing the team uncovered was a massive rectangular foundation ditch. The post holes dug into this ditch were engineered to support immense weight, with some plunging 80 centimeters, so nearly 3 feet deep into the earth.
Keep in mind, they are digging 3 feet into compacted earth without steel spades.
Right. And they weren't just dropping logs into holes. To keep these massive structural timbers perfectly upright and secure, the builders wedged them into place using large pieces of sandstone.
Which makes sense.
And fascinatingly, they used debris from older demolished buildings.
Wait, really?
Yeah. They were recycling the rubble of their past to stabilize the foundation of this new community hub.
That is so poetic.
The engineering of the floor was just as resource-intensive. They created a wooden subfloor by taking small tree stems, splitting them exactly in half, and laying them flat-side down across the massive interior space.
Sounds like a lot of work.
And then, once that wooden foundation was laid, they covered the whole thing in a thick layer of smoothed clay, which archaeologists refer to as daub.
Right.
And to fully grasp the architecture of this period, we have to look at the walls. These were wattle and daub structures.
So how does that work exactly?
Well, the wattle is a woven lattice of wooden branches And flexible saplings, think of a very sturdy, oversized basket forming the skeleton of the wall.
Okay, got it.
And the daub is the wet clay, mud, and sometimes straw mixture that you forcefully pack into and over that wooden lattice. Once it dries, you have a solid, surprisingly insulated, weatherproof wall.
Okay, but looking at the excavation notes, I notice a detail that creates a bizarre contradiction.
Yeah, the rubble issue.
Right. If this building is 3 times the size of a normal wattle and daub house, then logic says when it eventually burned or collapsed, there should be 3 times as much fired clay rubble left behind.
Which is exactly what you would expect.
But the paper explicitly notes that there was a surprisingly low amount of burned daub found at the site. So how does a 350 square meter building leave behind so little wall material?
That anomaly actually forced a major reevaluation of what this building looked like.
Oh, really?
Yeah. When a fully enclosed, heavily roofed wattle and daub house burns, the massive amounts of clay from the high walls and roof structure bake and collapse inward, leaving a thick, unmistakable layer of rubble.
But they didn't find that here.
No. The absence of that rubble in the megastructure suggests it was never a fully enclosed, dark hall. The prevailing architectural theory is that these were largely unroofed.
Like an open-air space?
Exactly. We should visualize them as open-air courtyards or breezy pavilions. They likely had wattle and daub walls marking the perimeter, but the vast majority of the interior was just open to the sky.
Which makes perfect sense when you think about the thermodynamics of human gatherings.
How so?
Well, if you pack hundreds of people into a closed, fully roofed structure with torches and body heat, the air quality becomes unbreathable very quickly.
Oh, absolutely. It would be stifling.
Right. An open-air courtyard instantly solves the problem of ventilation for a massive assembly.
It's exactly the kind of space you need if the goal is communal governance, rather than isolating a single ruler in a private throne room.
So if it's a giant open courtyard designed for crowds, what were they actually doing in there? Because the paper notes a very telling absence. They found absolutely no normal ovens or standard domestic hearths inside the megastructure.
Right. And if this were a palace functioning as the daily residence of an elite class, you would find the infrastructure to support them.
Like kitchens.
Exactly. You would expect massive kitchens, large-scale storage, and standard domestic ovens for daily baking. The complete lack of domestic hearths confirms nobody was using this space as a private home.
Since they weren't baking bread, the researchers took soil samples to look for botanical clues about what was being consumed.
And what they found was fascinating.
They found feathergrass, which is typical of the surrounding steppe environment.
Yep.
And they found cornelian cherries.
Also standard.
But here's where it gets really interesting. They discovered the mineralized remains of henbane.
A plant with a very specific and very potent physiological effect.
Right, because for those unfamiliar, henbane isn't a food source.
Definitely not.
It is a highly potent psychotropic and medicinal plant. It contains tropane alkaloids, specifically scopolamine and hyoscyamine.
Which are powerful compounds.
Yeah, when humans ingest or inhale it, these compounds cross the blood-brain barrier and block specific neurotransmitters. The result is profound altered states of consciousness.
Very intense experiences.
Vivid visual hallucinations, a feeling of detachment from reality. Finding a powerful hallucinogen in a giant public assembly space strongly suggests something beyond mundane town hall meetings was happening here.
The presence of henbane moves our understanding of the space from purely administrative to deeply ritualistic or shamanic.
That makes sense.
Throughout human history, altered states of consciousness have been utilized not just for individual spiritual journeys, but as a mechanism for communal bonding.
Like a shared experience.
Yep. Exactly. Breaking down ego boundaries through shared ritual can be a very effective way to bind a large group of people together, especially when they need to reach consensus without a king forcing a decision.
The physical artifacts pulled from the dirt absolutely support this idea of a highly ceremonial environment, too.
The inventory really does read like the setup for an intense ancient ritual.
Right. They found a mysterious clay conical object referred to as an idol, though its exact representation remains ambiguous.
Very enigmatic.
They found intricately painted ladles, and they found zoomorphic protom attached to a bowl. Wait, zoomorphic protom, we're talking about an animal-shaped sculpture, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like a bull's head physically incorporated into the pottery, probably used to pour out specific ritual drinks.
That is the consensus. I mean, it isn't a bowl you use for a Tuesday night stew, you know? It's a vessel designed for specific libations or offerings.
But the most revealing artifact wasn't actually found on the floor.
No, it was found deep underground.
The foundation deposit. This is the detail from the excavation that really stuck with me because it highlights the deep psychology of these builders.
Oh, it's fascinating. So, in one of those massive post holes, buried 1.15 meters deep.
Which is well over 3 feet down.
Right. Situated at the exact base where a primary structural timber would rest, the team uncovered a highly fragmented cup.
And it was broken into roughly 140 pieces.
Yeah. And it wasn't just dropped, it was deliberately shattered.
Wow.
And the choice of the object is vital here. It was a beautifully crafted red ochre painted cup. But more importantly, it was manufactured in the older pre-Cucuteni tradition.
So to the people building this megastructure, this cup was an antique.
Exactly. It was a tangible piece of their past, representing their ancestors and an older way of life.
That's incredible.
They took this culturally significant antique, shattered it into over 100 pieces, and buried it at the absolute foundational base of their new communal center.
You know, we still see echoes of that human impulse today. We smash a bottle of champagne against the hull of a new ship to bless its journey.
Right.
We carefully pack time capsules into the cornerstones of new municipal buildings to connect our present to the future. It's a psychological mechanism for consecrating a space and giving it weight.
What's fascinating here is how all these disparate clues synthesize into a cohesive narrative.
How so?
Well, you have the massive open-air pavilion design built to hold crowds, the complete lack of domestic ovens, the presence of psychotropic henbane to induce shared altered states,
Yeah.
the bull-headed ritual bowls, and the deliberate ceremonial burial of ancestral pottery at the structural roots of the building. None of this points to a residential palace for a single wealthy ruler.
Not at all.
Every single piece of evidence points heavily toward a communal, ceremonial, and administrative space.
It functioned as an ancient town hall, intertwined with the reverence of a cathedral.
Perfectly said. A physical nexus where the community gathered to negotiate their daily survival while simultaneously reinforcing the shared identity and spiritual beliefs that kept them unified.
So what does this all mean? Why does a 6,000-year-old architectural anomaly in Romania matter to you, listening to this today?
It's the big question.
I think the grand takeaway from this PLOS One paper is a profound challenge to our modern cynicism. We often assume that extreme top-down hierarchy is the inevitable price of living in a large society.
Oh, that it's just required.
Yeah, we assume we are mathematically doomed to require a boss just because there are a lot of us. But according to the researchers, Stăuceni Holm shows that humans are fundamentally capable of organizing incredibly complex, massive settlements through peer-to-peer cooperation.
They built literal infrastructure for equality.
Exactly. They engineered giant open-air assembly halls together to perform rituals, perhaps utilizing henbane to forge a shared perspective and to govern themselves collectively.
It is a really powerful historical counter-narrative. However, looking at the broader archaeological record of the Cucuteni-Trypillia culture leaves us with a lingering, somewhat haunting question.
Oh, what's that?
The researchers note a fascinating and ultimately tragic trend. As these settlements continue to expand over the centuries, evolving into the absolute largest of the megasites, the architecture shifted.
How did it shift?
The smaller, neighborhood-level megastructures like the communal open-air pavilion we've been exploring began to disappear from the archaeological record.
So they stopped building the accessible local gathering spaces?
They did. They were gradually replaced by just one singular, overwhelmingly massive central structure for the entire expanded population.
Oh, wow.
And this architectural centralization of the gathering space occurred right before the entire Cucuteni-Trypillia civilization ultimately collapsed.
Man, it forces you to wonder about the physical limits of consensus. If communal egalitarian governance fundamentally relies on a physical space where everyone can be seen, heard, and participate in the ritual, what happens when a society physically outgrows its courtyard?
It's a tough problem to solve.
It really is. Did the sheer immense scale of their population eventually make true participatory equality logistically impossible? It leaves us to ponder if the centralization of their assembly space inadvertently led to a centralization of power, fracturing the very foundation of the kingless society that made them so resilient in the first place.